Good evening, Professor Nihal Perera. It's my honor to welcome you to the Ataramadhyava channel because when I was looking into the recent floods in 2025, and I was talking about, the importance of architecture in how we should plan, which might eventually lead us to be more careful about how we plan our cities. I was thinking I should also speak with you, though your research is necessarily of a very broader span, where you discussed about how cities, especially in colonial countries, had been made according to the wishes of the colonizer. And I was thinking, leading with this topic of why the 2025 floods were so devastating to our country, I'm going to also ask you to come and will lead to that finally. But let's talk about space and the constructions of cities, and specifically how we believe that space is neutral, how we think that space and the buildings and the cities that are constructed has no ideology. Because I've started reading your book, Society and Space, right? And
Right.
something that that struck me was that there's nothing called neutral, even in space. There's nothing called neutral in words like urban, rural. That is also value filled. Margin, center, right? Even a word like the Middle East, middle as relative to what? And how the map itself is an ideological tool with which Europe has placed itself in the center. So these are things that normal kind of people like me who go into literature don't normally think about, right? So I'm going to actually get into that kind of thinking in your interview. But let me start, Professor, by asking you, what made you take to this discipline? Because I believe it's not a very common one, especially in Sri Lanka. How did you get there? And I know you studied under seminal theorists of, say, world system theory, like Wallerstein, right? Wallerstein, maybe that's how you pronounce it. And like he's a seminal philosopher of putting that theory into place in the world. So what it felt like studying with him. Basically, how did you get to this kind of thinking?
I think it was a long journey. Wallerstein helped, of course, but first kind of like becoming interested in politics, social justice, then studying architecture, and then figuring out, the culture of architecture, you know, uh, the culture of architecture itself, and then being the chief architect planner of Mahavali, and then
So you were
studying
in Sri
planning.
Lanka at first. You started studying in Sri Lanka. Where were
Right.
you? Where did you start in Moratuwa?
Mortua. I studied architecture, and then, I worked as an architect. And then eventually I came to the realization of uh, uh, the culture of architecture. And that was the switch, uh, I can elaborate, if you want, okay.
Please
Because
do.
working with Selvaratnam and Perera. Selvaratnam was a kind of like one of the pioneer architects in Sri Lanka, like Jeffrey Bawa. And then one day, a woman from Colombo 7 came to me and asked me to design a Georgian house for her. Then I thought, like, oh my goodness, I don't even know this. And why would anybody want to build a Georgian house in Colombo? So, I had very little understanding of colonialism. I was a Marxist, if you will. But then I was kind of like just wondering what's wrong with the world, you know. And then I thought, I'm not going to continue like this. Uh, Even if I became rich designing, I'm not going to design. Uh, uh, I'm not going to become rich by designing houses for rich women in Columbus 7. So I was kind of like getting ready to kind of like leave. Like I left at a very bad moment abruptly, and sort of like I caused a lot of problems for myself and my family, because I then thought like I will join the government and design schools, hospitals, which are not like really design well. So then I resigned from that office, and then I went around shopping for a job, which took 6 months. I got married a little early, so I had 2 kids, and it was terrible living without any income. And buildings department didn't hire me. Jeffrey Baba didn't hire me. I went around. Eventually, I got into Mahaveli as a grade 3 architect. My job was to just do, if somebody wants to build a hospital, I would pull out all the drawings and stamp, print and stamp. So I also saw that, again, another revelation. I saw that the towns were very well planned, beautiful building, beautiful drawings, but they never become towns for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years because there's a very big conflict between what the plan wanted to accomplish and what the government wanted, how the government operated, because government allocated money for 1 or 2 buildings in each town every year because it was a big project. So say after 10 years, you will have 8 buildings in a jungle in their proper places, but eventually the whole puzzle had to be completed before it became a town. Then I was very unhappy about that. I complained about it, and I said, if you're sending people to these areas, you should have a town from day one, not in 30 years, because they will be dead by then, right? So I'm beginning to see. I was beginning to see, these things are. People were not a part of these calculations, in many ways. Since my exposure to politics at the beginning, social justice and so on, I was becoming interested in this. And then Ulrich Plessner, who originally worked with Jeffrey Baba, joined as a consultant, and he totally understood what I said. And we spent many, many, many nights at his house, like in Colombo, making some suggestions. So we wanted the town to begin from a small square and expand, because now my concept was turned into a plan, right?
So this is around Mahaveli. This is around
Mahaveli. Right. Yeah, and then we threw away those plans, and then he took me to the minister, and then minister agreed that we need towns, and he said no money. Then I was like late 20s, I said, I was really stupid. I said, can I tell you how to find money? It's silly to think about that. And he said, yes, Gamnisanai. I was so surprised now looking back at it. And I said, this is a big project where you build dams, canals, and so on. But that's not what make these people survive. They need a town. They need a place to go to. They need employment. They need, medicine. So if you don't even have a town center, how are they going to survive? And so on. He said, oh, yeah, okay. And then I said, you need to allocate some of that money that you're using for this big construction. He agreed. So immediately I became the chief architect. Ulrich became the consultant, and we created a new office, and we planned 12 new towns between 83 and 89. So I became interested in that, and by 89, the project has kind of come to, an impasse because of the LTT, government LTT fight, and so I got into the PhD program. In the meantime, I went to London and did a master's in urban development. So I learned urban development a little bit more.
London, where, Nihal? Which university in London? Which university in London, Nihal?
University College. University of London, University College London, okay, which is a part of University of London.
Yeah.
So, and then I learned, because I was interested in space, which I never learned very well because nobody really taught me. I asked many questions, but you're a university teacher, they said, you don't know what it is? Then I said, okay, I can't ask these guys. They will never tell me what it is. And I think now I know they didn't even know what it was. So in London, I learned how to put political economy and space together, because Lefebvre had talked about the capitalist state and the making of a space, and David Harvey, political economy, capitalism, the market, and how space is produced through the market.
In
and some
London,
people are
Nihal,
marginal.
yeah,
Yeah.
in London, were they actually considering these things at that time? Were they thinking of the politics of space when you went in the 80s? Were they doing that?
They were, but they were not calling it politics of space, because until I came to a point after my PhD, I still remember having a conversation with Wallenstein. You know, he just said, "You're doing politics of space." You know, off the bat. You know, like I said, "Oh, okay, that's what I'm doing." But Lefebvre actually, in a way, did that because he was a Marxist. He was interested in spaces that the state produced, and he was an anti-capitalist state. So he even came up with the concept of right to the city, like, and so on, like, and so on. So it was like oppositional, basically. And same with David Harvey. He was more interested in capital accumulation and how that shapes the built environment and so on. So I learned these things. So that was good. And yeah, and then when I went for my PhD at SUNY Binghamton, I went because of two people: Anthony King, who had written about colonial urban development, is very well known. He was my mentor, actually, and then Emmanuel, who has written about the capitalist world system. So it was nice to join that group, and then I began. I was asking some simple questions. How do I get?
Nihal,
Yeah.
honestly, the names that you're throwing around, just getting into a PhD program with them, just getting in is a victory by itself. So was it through your conversations and, exchange of ideas that you got the chance?
I don't know. I was, you know, I would like to say I was lucky because even University College in 1984, I got an opportunity to go to MIT for a conference, and then I I used that opportunity to go and study at MIT for a semester on housing, and then my colleagues here who did architecture with me were saying, "Do you know how big a school is MIT?" I said, "I don't know." and then I went to UCL, which is a great place, like, so.
Liz, yeah.
Actually, I didn't know what I was, I wasn't paying attention to this anything big, like
Prestige.
I
It wasn't prestige that was driving you, no?
Sorry?
It wasn't prestige that was driving you.
No.
And also,
But
I'm assuming you would have got scholarships, right? To get to these
yeah,
very
yeah.
expensive places?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I didn't have any money. And actually, like there was a time, long before that, my father was asking me to find a scholarship. And I said no, because I'm going to be in this country. I'm going to, work my ass off and develop this country. Like this is my country. I'm not going anywhere. Until I first went to the US in '84, that was an accident. Many accidents happened, like because I did some research on housing at Galway because we were doing housing at Marvelly. Research is almost like no research in architecture. So, but I was doing, and it's a funny story. So I was invited by the housing specialist of the USAID at the American Embassy, like since a left wing guy. So I was just wondering, like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, why does he want to see me? And then he shows the photographs that I took of those houses, and I think he's definitely a CIA guy. This stupid story, and then, I mean, I'm smart enough, I guess. I thought like, oh, Ulrich must have given these things to him. This must be the connection. So, I mean, to calm down, of these things. So, going back to Binghamton, that's what I wanted to do. Like, where do we get our ideas from? In why do we build the way we build? So that's what I was pursuing. And then I was actually writing this grand theory, like grand thesis rather, starting from Anuradhapura period and Polonnaruwa period and this 2,500-year-old history. And then I soon realized this is all nonsense. Like none of these things have influenced any of the architects or the planners or any of these guys. So I threw away all those chapters. and then began to look at...
Planners of what, Nihal? They did not influence the planners of modern towns.
No. They don't even know. I mean, they write those things. I mean, Roland Silva has written about Anuradhapura planning. That was one of the beginnings of my work as well. But that's just an artifact. It's almost good to keep in a museum. Because it doesn't say anything. It doesn't teach us anything.
Okay, continue. Yeah.
So that's what I did. I mean, you were talking about names. I was also fortunate to work with James Duncan.
Okay, no, let's just backtrack still on your life. So once you
Right.
finished your PhD, then what happened, Nihal?
Once
you finished your PhD, did you teach in the USA or did you come back? What was your trajectory?
No, another surprise. I defended my thesis, and again, talking about the committee, like James Duncan, who was one of the originators of New Cultural Geography, was also on my committee. So I defended, and I knew everybody who defended, they said, they will ask you to write a chapter, they will ask you to do this and all these things. I just defended my thing, closed doors and open doors. And then I was going to get some coffee before I get to hear, what I need to do. And James Duncan says, Nihal, I turned back and come here, congratulations. I said, what? I'm done? He said, yes, you're done. And then a week later, Mark Selden, who is actually a prominent sociologist in the sociology department, met me and asked me whether I would like to transform that dissertation into a book in a series. That's what you're reading. And I was so surprised because there are many teachers of mine did not get tenure. In the United States, the tenure track period is 7 years. You have to publish X number of articles. You have to have books with an academic publisher. And now an academic publisher comes to me, and I'm saying like, wow, Westview Press. I said yes. I didn't even know what the hell I'm saying yes to. And then about 2 weeks later, Mark met me again. And he said, do you know what you said yes to? I said, yes, very timidly. And he said, you have to transform that dissertation into a book, which I'm seeing, really interesting because a lot of people who publish here, they publish their dissertations. He said, you have done your dissertation. Now you need to transform that into a book. And here are the parameters, It cannot be more than 225 pages. The one you're reading is exactly 200.
I'm going to ask you that privately after we finish because even my PhD was accepted by Routledge. They need me to translate into a book. So that's where I am. So another conversation after this, Nihal. Right. Okay, so then how did you end up teaching in the USA?
So when I got this book contract, I thought I will teach because at that time I was looking to come back to Sri Lanka, not to Mahavali because it was dead at that time, to Moratu or something like that. But many changes happened in Moratu. It was very hard because our universities, they have a limited cadre, right? You can't just barge into them, So there was no opportunity, in the last year or two that I was there. So then I got this book contract. I thought I will teach here for a little bit and then publish this first. And then I got the job at Ball State, which the only job I did actually in regard to teaching. But I did teach at Binghamton, where I did my PhD. I did teach for 4 years.
What was the impact of your book, Nihal, when it came out first? Who is the publisher?
It's called Westview Press.
Mm-hmm. What was the impact like? Did you make much waves, or did they realize Ceylon as a entity? What was the impact of your book?
I think Mark Selden wanted my book because study of space was something totally new at that time. Not totally new, Lefebvre and Harvey had published, but it was a pretty new field, and not many people have worked on it. But there were some geographers working around that time because Tony's work, Anthony King's work alludes to space as well. So, but anyway, not directly addressing space the way Lefebvre, Harvey, and myself of address. So he was very much interested in that. So yeah, so I think that was
Came
an
out in
impact.
1998, right? It came out in 1998.
1998, and then immediately after that, I got a message from Oxford University Press asking me whether I would like to do a second edition of that. Now it's still early 1999, and I said okay, like I don't even know where this is going. I said okay, and they had to have a contract with Westview, like and so on. So that's when I changed my title to Decolonizing Ceylon, which was actually the title of my dissertation. Because and also in India they would understand the post-colonial discourse.
And, right. So it's actually the same book that's in two different titles.
Yeah, but with a new preface.
Okay. All right. So Nihal, now fine. Let's get to words and language, because that's what my channel is also about. That's when I first started reading it, I realized that even the global map, which we don't even consider as being ideologically slanted, right? And because of what I'm reading, I went back to the earlier, like, the early maps, and I realized our island is quite the center of everything. And then how everything was then put back with Europe in the middle. Let's get to cartography. Let's talk about the ideology involved in map making, which we tend to think is not value. It's not a value-laden exercise. Let's just go to that for the minute.
Sure. What should I say about it?
Tell me a word like, say, the Middle East, right? Say even North-South, the ones with regard to a map. Are these neutral words, or are they very much a constructed, very well thought of words, which puts Europe in the middle and everything else like into the periphery?
I think so, because like first of all, if we take India, the Europeans were going to India, the source points of spices, and the main spice was pepper, basically, and what we know as India was actually the target, but they had no clue about India. So, and then they were going in
Amitav Ghosh's The Great Derangement, he said that the mass was called the Indies. The mysterious that they did not understand, that it wasn't India as we know now, but the whole area that they could not quite fathom, therefore could not control, were called the Indies.
Per my understanding, anything that was south and east of Europe was called India, right? So and then they were going to India, and then of course Vasco da Gama was the Portuguese were going around what we call Africa today, and then Columbus had a great mind, like he was going to go the other way. If the world is round, I can get from the other side, right? But the thing is, the Portuguese and the Spaniards, I'll get to India in a second, but first, Portuguese and the Spaniards fought in the sea. They were pirates, right? I mean, basically. So, and then the only person who could mediate was the Pope, right? Because both were Catholic countries. So Pope drew a line saying, this side is for the Portuguese and this side is for the Spaniards. I mean, you saw the map, like in my book. And then it was called the Pope's line, basically, right? And these were like treaties. And then what happened was, when the Portuguese were coming back from the east, if you want to call it for now, they crossed that line, and the Spaniards beat the heck out of them and took everything. So the Pope had to move that line. So that's how Brazil becomes a Portuguese colony, right? Now, so pretty much the world was written by the Pope, basically, right? And it is this line that was later moved to Greenwich, right? So they were producing a geography. They didn't know, they were exploring, and they were producing a geography. And then they were going to India, and then Columbus went and landed in an island, and then he called that India, and then eventually the whole of Americas became India. I mean, all the people who live there are called the Indians. Now, even the Indians from what we call India are called Indians, not Indians, right?
The Red Indians, the red name was the ones given to the Indians in the USA, right?
Oh, yeah, red part actually the British Red Indians, right? I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
everybody else is like Indians, right? So and then the Portuguese ship was called Carreira da India, and the colony, like once they went to Goa, it was called Estado da India. So everything was India, and the Dutch kind of like when they claimed a part, they called it the East Indies, East India, and then the French, took over a part. They called it Indochina. By that time, they also knew something about China, and the easiest way to understand this ideology is on the north side of Australia. There's a mountain range called Australindia, right? And so they were pretty much, even the company was called India, and then the Dutch separated the company into East India Company and the West India Company, right? I mean, they were the ones who went in the company, because the Portuguese, it was actually it was actually an empire, where the king sat, king was the head
At
of
the
the.
beginning, Nihal, they were very upfront about what they were doing. They were companies, business companies that came to the East.
Right.
And now to lead back to how they used our country, it was just as production of what they needed. And it's very interesting that you said the Portuguese were more interested, or they had power within the sea, but they were just using land as points of, getting stuff. Did things change with the Dutch? Were they more internally oriented as land?
Asia was what we call Asia. I wouldn't call my country, because it is a very recent concept. So during this time, I think uh, Portuguese could not really penetrate into land. So my argument is they pretty much created an empire in the sea. Charles Boxer calls it a seaborne empire, right? A historian. So I call it this, because I want to explore space. I call it the Portuguese Indian Ocean space. How is it organized? So as I spell out in the book, it was organized. The ports, outposts were organized along the line of the Carreira. The points where it stopped, and then it was also organized hierarchically. Whereas there was a king, the viceroy, and then captains generals and other ports.
Right. So did they affect the land? As you say, the concept of the nation is just after 18th century. So in our, like, we had kingdoms. Did the Portuguese spice trade affect internal land distribution organization at that time, Nihal, or did that happen later?
Absolutely, because there used to be land-based empires. Now this is actually this was unprecedented. This is unprecedented. So all of a sudden, my argument in that book is it flipped the thing. Like all of a sudden, sea becomes one empire, and then land becomes like scattered. So we sometimes call this set of islands is called an archipelago. So I say archipelago of land-based rulers, because the sea is now one. But now it's not total. Again, people like Chowdhury and so on have demonstrated it's Portuguese did not have 100% monopoly. Yet, if you want to kind of like think about the mainstream, they were the ones who were ruling.
So Sri Lanka internally did not get, whatever the landmass that we call Sri Lanka now, did not get, like there was not much intervention with regard to space by the Portuguese, right?
Because during the Portuguese time, again, there are lots of variations to this, but they were pretty much like collecting and gathering and looting and sending things back, right?
Right.
So they were not that highly organized. They were fighting, and so on. But it is the Dutch, who were more organized, and they tried to create a plantation, whereas they could constantly reproduce their authority and their exploitation. But they, according to my understanding, they failed. There are lots of people, they take a small example and say it succeeded. No, actually, cinnamon plantations failed The British tried very hard to do that. Every action that Brits took, it's in chapter 3, you need to get there. Every action they took to kind of like revive this plantation failed. So eventually they established coffee plantations.
Did they not, Nihal, when they were actually doing that, because their purpose was just trade, I mean, getting as much as they could, did they not even think about the long-term repercussions of those particular lands they were colonizing when they had this plantation system put in place? Just not us, West Indies, the sugar plantations. I mean, at any point, that did not strike them that they were actually ruining the countries that were giving them the produce.
I think there were many specificities. Ceylon, I know historians they are like influenced by nationalism, I think, unfortunately. I mean, we have colonial influence and nationalist influence, right? So they say, like, we were so great and so on and so on. I mean, you also had that map, of Ptolemy, and so on. But actually, the importance of Ceylon, it's Ceylon. I mean, all three colonizers called it Ceylon, in their own way, was to protect India. I mean, the British Ceylon was not running at a profit, but the profit came from India, and that is how Ceylon was produced. Ceylon would have never been produced, if not for India.
Because we were small in size and there was not much production coming out.
Not necessarily that. Can I say something about how Ceylon was produced then? Okay, so drawing on Wallenstein, there are usually 2 world wars before a hegemon emerges. So France and Britain had 2 world wars. The second one ended Napoleon, but the first one was kind of like, first one ended in 1796. It was actually fought. It's a world war. It was fought in the Bay of Bengal as well, right? Because the French were kind of like attacking the British. That is why British wanted Trincomalee, like port and all these things. So anyway,
when you're saying world wars here, you're not talking about the 20th century world wars, right?
No. Every hegemon, like before the Dutch became hegemonic, before Britain became hegemonic, and before US became hegemonic, there were 2 world wars, according to Wallenstein. Right. So the two of the last world wars are the ones that we call the world wars. And we may be heading towards another 2 world wars, actually. Yeah.
Let's not get there.
No.
Yeah, I think so. I quite agree with you. Now, tell me the dates of the First World War that you're referring to. Is it when the Dutch took over from Portuguese power?
No. This is when the Brits took over from the Dutch in 1796, right? And what happened was, during that war, the Dutch were saying, if we win, we would like all the colonies to join the Batavia Republic, which is now Indonesia. So had the Dutch won, Ceylon would have been a part of Indonesia, right? And then the Brits, there was no one Britain. There were 3. It was the company. There were 3 presidencies: Madras, Calcutta, and Bombay. It was the Madras forces that took over Ceylon, right? And then, so later in the middle of the 19th century, Britain put all those colonies together and created British India, right? So had Ceylon been a part of, under the company's forces, it would have been a part of India, right? And everything became part of India. But the stroke of luck, or I don't know whether it's luck or not, in 1802, after the Peace of the Amiens, the British Crown decided, or the British government decided, that they want Ceylon to be a crown colony, because India is too important to just, just to let the company hold Ceylon, So that is how Ceylon became a crown colony. This is not like a 2,500-year-old thing. It happened in 1802. So that's how it became a separate colony.
Because I'm curious, what was the Second World War that you referred to? Napoleon?
1815 is when Britain really becomes hegemonic. It's like the world wars that we know. The First World War, Germany lost, but never went back. Never surrendered. Came back again under Hitler's leadership, and they had to be defeated twice. Similarly, France, lost in 1796 in Europe. In our region, it was the Dutch who lost, and so on. So it was a world war, where many nations were taking part, and then. Then again, there were Napoleon rose and came back and fought again against the Brits.
And so the British hegemony actually dates back to the Napoleon defeat.
Right.
In that sense.
Yes. Until the end of the century. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now you're saying even the Dutch did put plantations in place. So were they not concerned with the future of the people? I mean, obviously not, but
no,
that not even strike them that this is dangerous to have one crop throughout their the land.
No, they were making profits, right? I mean, so in my if you want a spatial look at that. The world economy, the capitalist world economy began in Europe. Actually, from Palestinian standpoint, it was not, capitalism never arose in one country, which is what the Marxist idea is. But it was a world system at the beginning. World means Europe was a world of its own, and Western Europe was exploiting Eastern Europe, basically, right? So according to him, there's a core of powerful, rich countries and a periphery of countries that are being exploited, right? So it was Eastern Europe, and then whenever it hits a crisis, it expands, right? So anyway, they were going, what was I saying? I forgot the question.
My question was why they did not realize that having plantations throughout lands just for their profit is going to long-term harm the countries they were with.
No, I mean, I think their object was to exploit, right? I mean that was the whole point. So yeah, I don't think they thought about, the point is Europe created Ceylon and India and whatever, but Ceylon, India, and so on are not Europe. So the principles of Europe doesn't apply. It's you can't study European whatever, history, geography, and apply here, because this is not Europe, because this is the opposite of that, the other, and as Trinh Minh Ha would say, and actually I usually use in that book, you can see a geography book that kids kind of used in school. It pretty much says it is the white man in their climatic zone. The name slips, they are the highest. That climatic zone created the highest mankind, the greatest mankind, because they have to kind of work very hard. They have to save for the winter and all these things. And the same geography book says the savage in the tropical forest, they only have to put their hand out and sort of pluck fruits and so on and eat. They don't need houses or even clothes. So I mean, it is ridiculous that that Ceylon, India, and so on, going behind Europe. I mean, this is the discourse. And then Trinh Minh Ha would say,
and when the discourse had power to spread among our younger generations, because it was the British who put the school system in place. And even the education, we still do not question it. Nihal,
right.
Bothers
so
me a lot.
When they talk about when they talk about us, we are on the other side of the mountain, naked, like, I mean, etc., etc., So this is exactly, can the subaltern speak? Is exactly that, Gayatri Spivak is asking, like, you two are talking, two great philosophers talk about mankind. How could you talk about the man? I mean, humans. You cannot talk about us.
Nihal, to get back, so why, like, let's get back to the present now. What can we do now? Let's get back to actual town planning and city planning in Sri Lanka, right? Do we have anything called town planning, or are these naturally happening where people cluster into centers? Do we actually put town planning, except in a very weird case like Mahavali, where creating new towns in countries like ours? How do towns get created? Is it a natural process, or do people actually plan?
No, the people don't plan. I mean, I think, I mean, the planners plan, like, and administrators plan and politicians plan, where, like, where stadiums should come and all these different things, but people are voiceless in this planning, in the process of planning. In the planning school, they teach everything foreign, like, I mean, it all comes from Europe. As I told you, this is a European product, but this is not Europe. Like, I mean, this is a total myth. And then the curriculum hardly has anything, from, say, the local experience. Like, for example, in Mahavali, like, I mean, we created something that can work here because the government program is different, right? Uh, 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 I mean, it's not grounded. And similarly, we had a great housing program, Million Houses program. Million Houses program is a political term, but
When was
the
that?
support.
When was that, Nihal?
83 to 89, around the same time as the Mahavali project, Mahavali program that I was talking about, and it was a support system that was great, and actually it has influenced the whole world, but not our universities.
What was this million housing scheme?
Million Houses program that's a big word that that Premadas used, for that. But the thing is, it was like,
Are you talking about the Gamudavas?
Gamuda was a part of that. But the concept is, we can actually help people build build or complete their own houses, right? Because it is the people who should be deciding. I mean, these ideas come from Europe, actually. John Turner in the late 50s and early 60s said the same thing. Like, when he was sent to Peru to design public housing for slum dwellers.
Sorry, Nihal, your staff will need to repeat.
He said,
that.
Built.
Let's get back to the Peru example again. You got stuck for a minute.
Okay, so when John Turner was asked to go, build public housing in Peru, he said that the houses that you call slums are actually self-built, right? So because they're self-built, there's nothing I can solve. There's no problem to be solved, because the problem is the lack of housing at affordable prices. So people have solved that problem. There's nothing that I could solve, right? So public housing is not a solution for slums. So
even though they are very uncomfortable and they may not have all the amenities that you might expect a human being to have, is that still a solution then, Nihal?
It is a solution. Like, if you don't mind, I need to probably connect this.
Taj. For everyone who has seen my photographs on FB, Nihal is actually in my house on the other side of it. They're going to wonder why, Nihal, if they have been seeing my photograph, why that's my house that you're in. Okay, right.
Actually, I have shown studying Dharavi and Vanathamulla, I have shown, demonstrated that there is no natural trajectory, right? Turner didn't say this part. There is no natural trajectory from people moving from so-called slums to apartments, because these are two different kinds of things. So, because first of all, I mean, like we studied, Nirmani studied Vanathamulla. When she was studying, she saw that there was a self-built house, and there was this woman who was living there, and she cooked one meal sometimes. Sometimes if they didn't have enough food, they would starve, and so on. But they were moved to a flat in Vanathamulla. And after the first month, they got bills that they couldn't pay, right? So this is moving from poverty to chronic poverty. Some people may be changing because these are two different lifestyles. In this so-called self-built housing, they have control over their own lives. Number two, they focus on their lives, their kids. Sometimes they go hungry, whatever. But in these flats, they have to have a monthly income to pay, which they don't have. So actually, there is no trajectory. This has been tried across the world to force people to
particular lifestyle, no? A particular lifestyle that requires them to be the labor force of another particular lifestyle. I see what you're saying there.
It's like when I first worked in, like I'm not like an upper middle class person. So when I first worked in an architecture office, some of these guys, like I mean, they were talking about I have to pay bills. I have to pay bills. I was just wondering, just a graduate, like I don't know what bills they're paying, So this, like I like to learn from a lot of things. So it got stuck in my mind. What are these things? So every question, be careful when you ask, it gets stuck here, right? So, and then eventually when I was studying Vanathamulla, I realized this is what the middle class do. They work and earn money and they pay bills. Work, earn money, pay bills. And these guys don't do. Actually, what we cannot understand is these guys are far more freer than this middle class. And middle class people, like, okay, I mean, what I mean, they would destroy, like the street vendors, street vending, like the stalls. They would like to sort of like do slum clearance. I mean, this is total arrogance of nothing, I think.
I read recently on your Facebook, and people like Kaushal Herat, I think, who spoke about why are we still following very Western-centric ideas in trying to have clean cities when our people really is more fluid, it's more seamless. And I have a friend who actually designed this house. A book of his is coming out saying, the in-between spaces where the borders are where the life actually happens. So how does cleanup projects?
How does what?
Cleanup projects, like what happened in Kandy, the cleanup project which you just criticized, right? How does that challenge the other side that says we need clear pathways to walk through? Is it that we have accepted a lifestyle that may not have originally been ours? Are we still being led by colonial concepts of what a city should be?
So the lifestyle we have accepted, that we should not have accepted, are these lifestyles of the middle class people, especially those so-called educated, who comes and kind of like tries to destroy those things that people try to use to make a livelihood, right? Because what they call the informal sector, it did exist all the time. From time immemorial, everything was informal. The formal sector is the new one. It's the aggressor, right? Because formal sector did not exist before colonialism, right? Now we say you need to go to banks, you need to kind of like pay taxes. I'm for those things. But now, so having established that, the formal sector is the one that does not have the right, in a way. Formal sector is the colonizer. Now, do I say it should be eliminated? I don't take their view. It's not like an oppositional game that one should be eliminated and one shouldn't be. I think we need to carefully think, and we need to carefully plan to accommodate. Because once you destroy what do you call a street vending, thing. You're not destroying a street, a structure. You're destroying a livelihood. That guy is earning money, and that guy is kind of like actually maintaining a family, feeding a family. If you cannot give whatever he's doing or she's doing, please don't destroy. I think these people are very arrogant, and very ignorant. Ignorance and arrogance, they go together, I think. So I do believe, I think we need to pay attention to both sides of the story, or maybe more sides. I have done an interview on the informal sector, with an Indian magazine, which I can send you.
Yeah, because I live in an area where on Sundays there was a puller in Gangudavila, and it was the whole road, of course, was blocked, but there was like cars could slow down and buy their plantains and whatever. And in the cleanup, they were shifted to this structured area. Maybe it's still as vital, I don't remember, but as a child, I remember the dynamism and the vitality of that space. Lorries
Madhu,
the night, and they lit candles and they waited. And so
and Madhu,
life, it's
yeah.
gone now.
And Madhu, the thing is, it's not like the street vendor is vending that culprit. No, there are people who are buying from the street vendor. That is why the street vendor is there. So this is the thing that the people who have gone through university cannot understand. I mean, these are not like people on the street kind of like destroying, attacking the street vendors. These are people with university education. What did you learn? In the university? Because
we don't question. I realize now, Nihal, we do not question very often. I think arts graduates do a little bit. Otherwise, the politics of publication, the hierarchy, even like that the university should climb up the ranking ladder. These are taken as gospel truths, Nihal. They are never questioned. And some of us trying to question it, we are considered the maverick. So I get you. I will not go there, but I want to lead the conversation into like now what happened in November. Whole villages went under landslides, and now it seems a bit dated when I talk about the floods. But my fear is, and this is why I started this series, my fear is it might be the first of many devastating, sudden environmental catastrophes that we might see, because we are still doing the same things we always did. I mean, there were villages which disappeared. There were landslides in places that never had landslides, and we saw roads just going away. Right now, we have forgotten all this again. But what should we do now, Nihal? Because we are an island and we have central hills, which underwent many cracks. What's happening? Can we stop it now, or are we already too late?
I don't have the magic to kind of like respond. I mean, give an answer to that, but I can address that thing. So this people of this country, if we want to call it Sri Lanka before colonials, they did live with the environment. I'll give you a couple examples. People used to build houses, like with small cells and with long verandas, and the man used to sleep on the veranda, and they used to cook and do everything outside. Housing, right? When temples were built, even Aluvihara and so on, I mean, they built into the mountain. They never built on top of the mountain or in very like in places, they didn't dominate even on the outside, right? People knew how to work with this. And this is the colonial education or colonial education or post-colonial arrogance. I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of both of those that's causing these problems. I mean, look at the size of the hotels and statues and all sorts of different things that have been built, And I mean, maybe, people argue, oh, did anything happen to hotels? Did anything happen to temples? I mean, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, this arrogance is very much in display, right? Actually, it is the British who bring. It's not the Portuguese. It's the British who bring compartmentalized living, understanding the world through compartments, understanding plants through categorization and classification, right? Understanding animals and understanding the globe through the longitudes and latitudes. This whole idea of kind of like taking control through the classification comes from them, right? So unlike the older environment where people live with the environment, they introduced a system of boxes. There's a living room, dining room, this, that, and the other, right? And so our planning system is also like that. We have land users, like what do you call industrial, commercial, and so on. You can divide these things because actually in Sri Lanka, because of these things, because of this division, because of the division doesn't work. In the United States, we have something called mixed use development. Mixed use, because otherwise you will have to get in the car from your residential zone, go to the commercial zone, you have to drive 10 miles to buy some milk, right? So you don't have to do it. Now we have mixed use, right? Now in our country, the planners kind of use this terminology. Actually, if you go to a Handya, it is not mixed use, because it is a whole bunch of different uses, many more than what the planners can ever imagine, but it is not divided yet. Mixed use is once you divide, you can put commercial and residential, you can put this, that, and the other.
It's but like then our Handya is more practical, because right. So many things, like we didn't have to separate and get back artificially. The Handya is born indigenously by being practically. They are with what we need. Yeah.
Right. And it's like almost like, my example is, if you send daylight through a prism, you will get 7 colors, right? But it's not just 7 colors. There are lots of other things that come out of it. You can't put the 7 colors back and get whatever you put on the other side. You can never. So Handya and so on, it's much better if the Sri Lankan geographers and planners and architects figure out the value of this, rather than separating and trying to kind of like apply some Western lenses to understand this. No, try and understand this. The only way to understand this is by being there, number one, which a lot of people don't like to do. Number two, how to improve this is by working with people, because they are the ones who know. We have to first get off our pedestal and accept the fact that if you are living in this house, you know this house better than I do, right? And there are lots of people who will come and tell you, no, you can do this, right?
And I found it very ironic, Nihal, when you and I think Kaushalya got attacked. Look at what American educated people say without realizing you were actually defending what was totally not American, totally not Western centric. So that we have gone beyond, we have accepted, we have forgotten what we actually originally, your idea, it borders very close to nationalism and nativism when I term it like that. But I think some of the things that we did have originally is where the West is now coming back to. And though we have forgotten.
Yeah. They are exploring, but the difference is when the West explodes through their own framework, right? And we don't necessarily have to use a Western lens to understand Handya. We can actually use a Handya to understand the Western lens. My research is not about using a Western lens to understand whatever is on the ground, but to understand the ground and look at all these theories. What are they saying? I'm not saying theories are bad. This is the difficulty, because the West has taught us either this or that. No, it's both. We have to understand the ground, and we can look at the theories. And some of these theories can be used critically. And this is how we go forward in post-colonialism. Post-colonialism is not free of colonial. Post-colonial is not totally colonial. It's a critical journey, beyond colonialism. But it's not rooted in colonialism. If it's rooted, then you're colonial. But you have to operate in the margins and start, looking at and questioning, critically question and so on. But these discourses that I told you about, like the planning and development and the kind of, those are totally rooted in the West, so there is a subtle difference
Correct.
in this.
Now, just to we might have to end soon, Nihal, but
Right. Yeah.
is there any is there anything we can do now as a people in seeing that should people not go back to some of the places they were? And I believe some people are still in camps, or are we going to forget this very quickly and continue to live? What are the changes we need to make? Everyday changes, you think? I know this is not quite your field. It's different.
No, it is my field. Yeah.
How should we help to make sure at least when it happens again to avoid the losses?
I think first of all we need to replan. We need to use this. I'm not using the word opportunity in a bad way. Opportunity not for us to kind of like impose our ideas on people, but to get people to build this country, because this is still colonial, right? I mean, people have never gotten any power. People are so much separate from the state. And then the state, these professionals and so on, keep people away. I think we need to bring the power back to the citizens, not back power to the citizens. I'll give you an example. We worked after the tsunami in an area in Hambantota, and then what happened was kind of like people were building things in places that was not affected by tsunami. And so our idea was actually, if the people were allowed to make a plan, plan in the sense, just make a plan of the disaster. Where did the disaster hit? And how much money do we need? What do we really need? And so on. This is done from Colombo, and even Harini said that she needs data to do this when I presented this idea. The idea is get the people to kind of map out what went bad, what went wrong, and how are we going to kind of respond to this? Because I'll go back to tsunami first. If you have a plan where you say these are the places that were damaged, then if you come with money, I can show you this, and you can say, I don't want to dump money here, I want to dump money here, right? So your money will be worth, you will get the value for the money, and then we will get something, as people, right? The issue is too centralized. I think we need to try and decentralize. I mean, even the last.
Though I do agree with you, Nihal, it would also require some level of educational standards if you're actually making decisions as to where to live and all that. Just to rely on what people want might actually be quite dangerous in some instances.
Yes. So that is why there should be planners not in Colombo. There should be planners in all these different places, right? And this has been discussed in planning theory and so on. So there should be planners who are decentralized. So this whole idea is to centralize.
I think it's also getting very complicated by the fact that real estate globally is one of the most lucrative businesses that people can have. And in fact, even if you naturally think this is a dangerous place to build, somebody might be trying to sell you the land, let's say for a hotel. So that, again, I'm going back to Amitav Ghosh's a book where he says now the people who sit in the most dangerous area of, say, Mumbai is actually at the seafront, and those are the richest people. So that it's a blind eye that real estate turns into the danger simply because of profit. So we have very many complications. It's not so much that it's a authentic, this is where we want to live scene.
Complication is there. We need to look at all different sides. We cannot look at one side. Decentralized doesn't mean that all the power should go to, say, a village in Hambantota and all these different places. Because when a big damage like this happens, somebody needs to count. Who is counting? Colombo, needs to say, what is the damage assessment? How many millions or billions of dollars? Where are we going to get these things? And so on. But the thing is, the real practice cannot happen there. That's what I'm saying. So the problem is we are so colonized, we can only do one thing. Everything happens in Colombo, everything. No, there is a job that Colombo needs to do. There is a job that local people needs to do. So we need to be able to, we have to work with diversity. We don't know how to work with diversity. Isn't
That I
that the problem, you know?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
so
In every
even the
aspect.
same thing. Sorry?
Yeah, in every aspect, Nihal, not just this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Even when somebody cooks, we cook a malung and we cook a like a hodda and we cook, you know, like it's diverse, right? I mean, you know, this is a nation state, you know, like we have diverse group of people. You know, they have different beliefs, you know, they have different, you know, destinies. And so we ought to be able to work. But the problem is our education system is so like, you know, provides a tunnel vision. It's not, it doesn't even provide a tunnel vision because it's all about cramming and passing the exams, you know, like, I mean, and so on,
And
right?
not questioning the
Not questioning.
colonial value system that has been put in place so firmly. And that is true of general education and tertiary, sadly, except in like pockets. So we do.
Madhu, to question colonialism, you ought to be able to question yourself, right? I think, you know, when we say what do you call unlearning, we need to unlearn our privilege. We go through a school and we figure out we are privileged. I'll give you an example. I know a student who was in one of my classes, you know, like the Sinhala classes, online class, right? And she got a degree from a important university in Sri Lanka, and she went back home and she told her mother, I want to travel, I want to see the world, whatever. She said, no, you are a girl, you have to stay at home, right? No, I mean, the thing is, she probably had no clue that because with this education and so on, I mean, she thought like she was like flying, right? And then she told her mother, you know, she insisted, and she said, find a man, right? But you know, like we need to understand all these different parameters, different things. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. I mean, I think this girl has a right to certain things, but also you can't, you know, like, I mean, you can't tell the mother this is not how you work, right? Because mother has a, you know, has grown up in a particular environment, and mother believes in some sort of responsibility, right? And so on. So you can't just say forget it, you know. I mean, they have to negotiate that thing, you know. It's not my thing. But I'm trying to say is how much we don't know, and when you talk about, I mean, say, do people know what our resources are? What are our resources? Oil? Is that a resource? Every country with oil has dictators. You know,
Thank
the
God.
last,
Honestly, thank God we don't have oil right at this
we
point.
thank God we don't have oil. So
Yeah.
the thing is, what are our resources? How could we? And then we complain, you know, elephants are a problem, you know, like, and rivers are a problem. You know, this is what people don't have. How can we transform problems into opportunities? Aren't a whole ton of people coming from Europe and other places to watch elephants, right? So no critical thinking. Right? I think this is what we need. We need to be able to kind of like think very carefully. I in regard to transforming, I said something really interesting at the meeting with the Prime Minister. I told it's fantastic that Rambandas Kolla is now the president, and he has come from Tambutegama to Colombo in his power. I like it. I like him. I think he's one of the greatest people in my books. But if Rambandas Kolla can take Colombo to Tambutegama, that would be the great thing. See, in Sinhala, I said, Ekatamai Hapankam. Right?
Let's
The
see.
problem is when you get, it's like you becoming a department chair, you becoming a dean. You get into that office and you're stuck in that hierarchy, in that particular place. Now, how am I going to show efficiency? How am I going to show this? How am I going to show that? Similarly, you come from Tambutikam to Colombo, you get stuck in there. Is it possible not to get stuck in there? That's the question I'm asking. You know, like, is it possible to send some of this, you know, like decentralize this power to Tambutegama and Habarakada and all these different places?
I guess it's yet to be.
And to build,
Yeah.
can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
And to rebuild the nation, you know, with people rather than for people.
Again, though this is not a discussion, Nihal, I think, you know, everything everything starts with education of children growing up. So whether we can, but even if it's not going to happen in the next 5 years, start by educating children on the right concepts. Right. So Nihal, I need to say thank you because both of us can probably talk for hours in different aspects.
Right.
And I will probably, once I finish reading your book, might explain that in Sinhala and then ask maybe whether we could meet again, where I actually go through this, because every point you made here, that's a different interview by itself. And I just kept this very general here because I want it to be connected to my overall theme of what should we do to for the floods. But I mean, about the 10 points you have made on the themes, so important. And at some point, once I finish the book, I might first explain it in Sinhala and then ask you very, very specific questions again. But let me now say thank you, because every time I speak with you, and you've been kind enough to meet me when you come to Colombo, I learn a lot. And this is not a discipline I had been familiar with, but because now I am like Prasanna Liyanage, who's my architect, he's also now writing a book, and I've read that. I mean, same thing. There are a lot of people who think on these lines, and it's very, very important because it's connected to everything that our lifestyle is. It's everyday practice for some of us, how we live. So thank you, Nihal, and I am going to then come and speak with you again in Sinhala with these concepts, because it's vital. Because your book is in English. I know you put Ceylon in. That's also available in Sinhala.
There is a Sinhala translation.
Sinhala translation, and I'm really annoyed because I thought I bought it. I cannot find it, but I can discuss with you. Honestly, I'm just thinking, didn't I buy it? I came for the launch, for God's sake. So I'm just quite annoyed. But if I don't have it, I will get it and show it when I do this in Sinhala. But so I will see you again very soon in our Sinhala interview. Thank you for doing it, because this is a language channel finally. So I hope those who find English difficult will listen to the Sinhala and come here. Right. So thank you very much, Professor Perera, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks.